My name's Philip and I'm a clinical psychologist at the Child Development Service. Thanks for taking the time today to listen to this presentation. You've already been linked in with some handouts, and we recommend that you have some paper and pen available if you'd like to make notes about anything, including what you might like to try at home after listening to this presentation. In this session, we'll be learning about the Child Development Service and who we are and what we do. The session has a number of aims. What we're doing is we're largely looking at children's emotional development, in particular children's emotional needs, and we introduce something called the Circle of Security model. And the model is a really good framework at helping parents to understand their children's needs, and we'll talk more about that as we go along. We also look at ways that parents can enhance their capacity to provide a secure relationship for their child so that they can support their child's development. And again, we'll talk about that in more detail. We also look at ways that parents, to promote parents' understanding of children's sensory processing and the unique sensory preferences that children have. And we also try to enhance parents' ability to reflect on their children's sensory preferences and how this might impact on their child's behaviour and emotional state, as well as the relationship that parents have with their children. So before we start talking about some strategies in a bit more detail that you can use at home to support your child's emotional needs, I'd like you to think about what you want for your child and family. So is there anything you'd like to see change? Is there anything particular that you would like to work on with your child? Please write this down as your goal in this sheet. I'll just give you a few moments to consider that. And at the end of the session, hopefully you'll have some ideas for things that you can do to help you achieve this goal. We know that children learn best when supported in their everyday learning environment, and you play the most important role in your child's life as their parent or caregiver. And at the Child Development Service, we work closely with you to help you achieve your goals that you have for your child's development. At the Child Development Service, we actually have a team of clinicians who work in different areas of child development. So the team includes speech pathologists, occupational therapists, physiotherapists, social workers, clinical psychologists, paediatricians, therapy assistants, audiologists and nurses. And depending upon what your child's needs are, you might see one or more of our team members. And one good thing about the Child Development Service in particular is that we work as a team so that we're able to consult each other if need be, and also we can make referrals to other professions in conjunction with yourself if that's required. All children are hardwired for relationships. No matter what culture children are brought up in, children of all cultures need relationships with their caregivers. We know that all children inherit genetic characteristics from their parents, and each child also has their own temperament or personality. And what we also know is that the relationship with our children is crucial in promoting their development. Parenting that's both responsive and predictable helps children to have a secure relationship with their caregiver. And it's this secure relationship that provides a foundation that allows children to learn and develop various emotional and social skills. It also allows children to learn how to regulate their emotions and their behaviour as they continue to develop. So the first point is that children aren't born with the ability to regulate their emotions. It must be learned. And they learn that largely from their main caregivers or parents. We know that infants rely on their caregiver to regulate their emotional arousal. Perhaps you might reflect on when your child was an infant, what it was like. And we know that infants they can't communicate their needs. So if an infant is tired or hungry, they cry. And so what it is, it's the parent's responsiveness to their infant's cries that helps to calm them. And from running various workshops, I know that parents often tell me that they can recognise the different types of cries that their infant has. And as children get older and develop language, then they are increasingly able to communicate their needs and their feelings. However, children are often overwhelmed by their feelings, particularly their strong feelings. And when this happens, as we probably all know, they're more likely to act out, for example, by having a tantrum or becoming aggressive or by shouting. And so it's in these moments that children actually need their parents to be with them to help them manage their feelings. So rather than focus on the acting out behaviour, so instead of focusing on the meltdown or the aggressive behaviour, it's helpful that parents can be responsive to the underlying emotion that their child has. So children learn how to self-regulate by having it modelled to them. So in the first few years of life, parents usually regulate for their child, and that's often called co-regulation. So when your child does experience a strong emotion, such as sadness, frustration, anger, being scared, they can often be overwhelmed. And you can respond to them by actually tuning into their feelings. So what I mean by that is to acknowledge their feelings and actually help them identify it if needed. It's this sensitive response that helps children make sense of their experience and actually also helps them to calm down. So in this way, a sensitive parent helps the child to manage their emotions, and you're actually being very responsive to your child's needs. And what we know is that over time, when self-regulation is modelled consistently in this way, children will eventually learn how to regulate themselves so that when they are older and they do experience frustration or anger or being scared, then they'll be more likely to be able to manage those emotions on their own. So research has shown that children who can regulate their emotions exhibit a range of things. They experience increased empathy, greater self-esteem, better relationships with their parents and peers. They're more ready to attend school, and they also have an increased capacity to manage their emotions more effectively when compared to children who are not secure. So the role that parents have in teaching their children to regulate their emotions is crucial, particularly when children are young. So how we interact with our children today as parents does have an impact on them for the rest of their lives. Look, what we'll do now is we'll show you a short clip from the Circle Security website. After the clip, we'll talk more about the model.
Parents, we all wonder if we're getting it right. We want to know we're meeting our children's needs, helping them grow and giving them all that we can. We try to combine our own experience of being parented with the advice of others and our own instincts and beliefs about what is best. And still, we so often worry that we're not succeeding. In a world that is always offering the next best parenting solution, the Circle of Security is based on decades of attachment research. Unlike many behavioral perspectives, it offers relationship tools to provide a new way of understanding your children's needs, creating lasting security for them and more satisfaction for you. The Circle graphic has been created to help you know what to look for, so you can read your children's behaviour to guide you in meeting their needs. It's really not complicated. People of all ages have attachment needs. These needs can be divided in 3 ways. Let's look at this child. First, he needs to know the freedom and confidence to go out and explore his world. Second, he needs to feel assured that whenever he's ready, he can come back for comfort and protection. Third, he needs his caregiver to be in charge in a kind way. 3 basic needs that can be thought of as going out on the circle, coming in on the circle, and hands on the circle. Let's have a look in more detail. Feeling safe and supported, our children want to discover their world. When going out, they need to know that their exploration is encouraged, that we're right there watching over them, delighting in them, offering help when needed, and ready to enjoy their new adventures with them. And when they're coming in, They need us to refill their emotional cup. This means organizing their emotions and letting them know we are delighted to welcome them back, protect, comfort, and understand them. The key for us as parents is to remain strong and kind while knowing when to encourage their going out into the world and how to be available to welcome them back to us. It's crucial that we learn to identify our children's needs like this, because misreading them, or worse, missing them altogether, can cause pain and frustration. We all know how uncomfortable it can be to be held too close when we want to be out exploring, or kept at a distance when we need emotional support, or simply to be without someone who is bigger, stronger, wiser and kind, who we can trust to understand what we need when we're feeling lost, confused, or out of control. When a child misbehaves, the cause is often rooted in how safe and secure they're feeling. So it's not surprising that they behave well when a parent learns to tune into their child's needs on the circle in this way. And because our needs on the circle never disappear, learning to read cues can help you better understand and meet the needs of people of all ages, including your own. So that's all there is to it. Just know that at any given moment, your child is somewhere on the circle asking you to meet a need. Support my going out. Welcome my coming in. Be the hands that keep me safe by staying in charge and committed to helping me feel connected. And please remember this, there's no such thing as perfect parenting. At Circle of Security, we've come to realize that good enough is, well, good enough. All of us are going to miss needs on the circle time and again. Welcome to the club. But if we meet our children's needs enough of the time, the results will be happier, healthier, more secure children, and parents too.
Okay, so the circular security model that you've just seen is the model that we based all of our relationship work around. Some of you may have actually heard of this circular security model before. Lots of child health nurses, for example, have trained in this model. They may have talked to you at your child health nurse appointments about the model. With some of you, you won't have heard about this model. But although it looks quite simple, it's actually the result of over 50 years of research into brain development, research on attachment, on children's self-regulation, and on children's language acquisition. So look, there are three distinct aspects to the circle of security. What's referred to as the top half of the circle, the bottom half of the circle, and the hands. Now we'll explore the circle of security map throughout the session. Let's look at each of the individual needs for the child has. Firstly, on the top half of the circle, that's where children go out and explore their world, no matter what age they are. So for example, if they're a toddler, your infant's exploring the world by simply crawling to the other side of the room. If your child's older, they might be in the playground, they might be exploring different aspects of the park, for example. So if you look at exploration, what that means is that some of the needs that children have are they want their parents or caregivers to watch over them. So to watch out for any danger, if there's any danger there. They also want parents to delight in them simply for who they are and not just about what they achieve. Of course, that helps then children develop a very strong sense of self-esteem or self-confidence. They also want parents and caregivers to provide help for them when they have trouble. Now, the best way that parents can do this is to help children through the problem-solving process instead of just taking over for children. And the last point there you can see is just to simply enjoy being with them. So simply being available and attuned to your child and just having those close moments of connection. So whether that's enjoying being with a child when they're dancing, when you're playing with them, that could be a whole range of things, simply just being with them. Now, the bottom half of the circle is often called the transition phase, Often children might feel anxious if they're in the playground and they might need to recharge their batteries and then have a reconnection with their parents. So the bottom half of the circle is when children return to their parents. And we call the bottom half of the circle, it's welcome my coming home to you. Now what this means is if you look at the needs that children have in the box that you can see, the first need is about protecting me. So obviously when children are in danger and when as parents and caregivers you can see that they're in danger, then obviously you protect them, no matter what that danger is. One of the children's needs on the bottom half of the circle is for parents or caregivers to comfort them. So children need comfort even when there's no real danger. For example, children often get scared or anxious or stressed or worried, and they can't manage those strong feelings on their own. And the bottom one is about helping children to organise those feelings. So using words to help children understand their feelings and also to express their feelings. And just simply being with the child in those moments when they are being overwhelmed. That's really important for children, simply by parents being available to help those children manage those feelings. And we will talk about that in detail as we go along. Now there's a number of slides, there's about 4 or 5 slides that we'll see. They're all taken from a book called I Love You Because You're You by Lisa Baker. It's a book which you'll probably find in your local library if you're interested in looking at it. Let's just have a quick look and relate each of these slides to where the child might be on the circle. So in this first slide, the child's walking along the fence and the mother is looking at the child a little bit anxious. So I wonder what the children's needs might be in this slide. So the children is out exploring their world, walking along the fence. They're probably wanting their parent to enjoy being with them, to take delight in them. It might be quite a high fence and they might be a bit scared of falling. So in this case, they might also want their parent to protect them. So in some ways, this slide can depict both the top and the bottom half of the circle. And you might also notice that the parent in this slide has a look of anxiety. So we'll talk a bit later about how parents can model their own feelings in this situation, but I thought I'd point that out to you. So if we go on to the next slide, on this next slide, the cub and their mum are obviously having lots of fun dancing together. So I wonder where on the circle you think this little cub might be. So to me, they're quite clearly on the top half of the circle where they're just enjoying, where the cub is enjoying their mum being with them and vice versa. So on the next slide, the cub is obviously scared or anxious about what's behind the closed door, and I imagine they're feeling a bit overwhelmed. So in this case, they'd be on the bottom half of the circle. And so what some reassurance from their mum, they want their parent there just to reassure and protect them. Okay, so now on this slide, the cub is teary and looks upset or sad. So I wonder where on the circle, whether it's the top half or bottom half, they might be. So the cub is being obviously overwhelmed by perhaps their feelings of sadness and they're becoming teary. So looks to me like they're on the bottom half of the circle, so they're a bit overwhelmed by their sadness. And this final slide is where the cub's got off the bus, they've come home from school, and they're obviously happy, and the mother cub's happy, and both of them are sharing delight. The mother cub is showing delight in seeing their cub after a school day, and the cub is also sharing delight in seeing their mum again, and also coming back perhaps on the bottom half of the circle. Again, that's sharing their delight. So we've talked about the top and bottom halves of the circle. Now let's talk about the part of the circle that's the hands. What does it mean to be the hands, and how do we show these hands? Well, children need us to be bigger and stronger so that they feel safe and protected. Children also need us to be kind when they're struggling with their emotions. And to be wise is to know how to balance being firm, yet also being attentive to your child's emotions. So what is it that your child needs? So using the circle will help you to understand the needs that your child has, and it will also help you to guide how to use being the hands. The last point I'd like to emphasise is that the circle of security emphasises about being a good enough parent. We know that no parents are perfect parents, myself included, and that if you try and be a perfect parent, then you're setting yourself up for a lot of stress and anxiety. So really, that's why we do emphasise it's about being a good enough parent. And what I like about the framework from the circle of security is that it actually allows us to understand the children's needs that they have, both now and as they get older. So what we'd like to do now is to show a short clip from the circle of security. We're going to see a dad and his toddler in a playground. And what I would like you to do while watching this clip is just keep the circle in mind. In particular, just watch out for any circle moments that we've been discussing. In particular, you might want to observe the back and forth interaction between the dad and his son.
He's in this game these days where he's back and forth a lot. Like, he'll play going away. Hi.
Bye. Bye.
Bye. And he'll walk around the circle and he gets real excited about coming back. He's been gone for 30 seconds, but it's like he's been gone for years.
Hey, hi, that guy.
I mean, it's a fun game for me to watch him step out into his world. He's so much more capable now than he was just a few months ago. He's able to tell me more about what he wants or what he needs, or if he's frustrated about something, he can tell me sometimes what it is, or closer. Or he could tell me, and sometimes I can understand. It's more like what it is. Oh, hi. Did you come back?
Yeah.
Oh, good. Can I wipe your nose again?
Yeah.
Thank you. It only takes a little bit, that sort of refueling happens real quick, but it's sort of got to happen.
What do you mean refueling?
Well, like he runs down some sort of charge of being close to us, and then he comes back and he needs a little bit of recognition or just a touch. Or...
Hi. I'm high on that rock.
Yeah, you're high on that rock. He's pretty little, and it's a big world, and I can't blame him for wanting to stay somewhat close. But this balance between going out to explore and wanting to come back in and sort of, have the contact again.
Okay, so what did you notice while watching that clip? Did you notice any circle moments? So, for example, did you notice the dad following the child's lead at all? I noticed when the child asked Dad to look at him on the rock, the dad took delight in the child. Did you also notice the child, or did you notice the dad taking charge at any moment in that clip? You might recall that when the child wandered off into the jeweller shop, the father quickly got up and retrieved the child from inside of the jeweller shop. So he was taking charge so as the child wouldn't be disruptive in the jeweller shop. One of the comments I particularly liked that the father made in that clip was he made a comment about how his child comes in to refuel, and I particularly liked that comment. And you may notice with your own child where they're playing and they're out, 1 minute they're out playing, and they might be having fun, and then next minute they might get upset or something might happen, and they come back in to you for comfort or for help with something. So there are many times which you might reflect on where your child actually comes in for refueling. Children who consistently experience both a warm and responsive parenting go on to develop a sense of security and trust that their parent will be available to return to for emotional support after they've explored and ventured out into their world. So this next slide is what affects our family affects our children. Now, all families are unique and all families have their own type of relationships, and it's important to remember that the child grows up in your family, and it's important to consider the effect of our relationships have on our child. Now, parents also have their own personal characteristics and have their own personal situation. There's many factors which affect parents, such as your health issues, etc. We also know that children have their own characteristics, so that children have their own temperament or personality. We know that some children are shy, some children are outgoing, some children are more passive, some children are more active. So right from the word go, children actually are born with their own temperament. And we also know that children have their own developmental concerns or difficulties. For example, many children might have language delay or difficulties. Children might have difficulties with fine and gross motor difficulties. Children may have sensory processing difficulties, and children may have a range of developmental difficulties such as ADHD or autism spectrum disorder. So it's important to consider the unique child characteristics that your child does have. Now, there are a range of other factors which are important to consider. Family stress, for example. We all have our own stressors. Again, whether that's our own medical issues, our own mental health issues, there might be parental issues, there might be financial stresses that we have, employment and unemployment is an issue. So there's a whole range of factors which affect us as parents and families. It's important to remember those because what we're doing is we're asking you to tune into your child's emotional development. So often it's hard to do that because we don't have many resources and there are a lot of things that may get in the way. So it's important to consider that. So let's get on to helping your child. What are some of the strategies that you can do to help your child manage their strong emotions? What can we do to help our child? So let's go through these one at a time. So the first thing is about spending regular one-on-one time with your child. Now, it is important to spend individual time with your child. And we do realise that, particularly in this day and age, for various reasons, it's hard for many parents to do this. But nonetheless, it is still very important to have that one-on-one time with your child. And the best way to do that is to, when you are doing that, is for the child to have your full attention. So even if you're only able to spend 5 minutes or 10 minutes with your child, it's best to give your child a full attention rather than being preoccupied, for example, with other things. Another way you can help your child is to actively listen to your child and validate their emotions. So show them that you're actually listening and reflect their emotions. And there are various ways that you can do that. You can use words to reflect how your child might be feeling, even if your child may not have come across that word before. So, for example, when children get frustrated, to help them manage that frustration, it's actually good to actually acknowledge that. So what I mean by that is simply by saying something like, "Oh, look, I can see you're really frustrated." Or, "Yes, that is frustrating, isn't it?" And that's a way of helping children not only to be more in tune with the feeling, but to actually possibly even learn a new word. So another way is to encourage children's problem solving to help their emotions. And the first step of problem solving is, we've actually mentioned just now, is to acknowledge your child's feeling, whether it's whatever the feeling is that they're having. So for example, if the child is feeling anxious or scared, it's important to acknowledge that. And then to explore with them how, for example, they might be brave. So for example, if a child is feeling scared of having to sleep in their bed at night time, or if a child is feeling anxious about attending school for the first day, it's important to acknowledge that child's feeling of anxiety or stress, and then exploring with them about how they might be brave. Another common feeling that children have is when they're experiencing frustration or anger. So it's important to acknowledge that children's frustration. And look, there's probably many times during the course of a day where our children actually do get frustrated that we may not even notice. So a common example might be when children are playing. For example, they might be building a tower with their Lego and their Lego falls down. And you might notice them get slightly frustrated. So that's a great opportunity to get in as early as possible and simply acknowledge the child's frustration and then go on to then explore what the child might do without actually taking over and building their Lego. And what we know is that acknowledging children's feelings and helping them to problem solve it does actually have a calming effect. There are also other ways that we can help your child to calm down. For example, engaging children in deep breathing, particularly older children are good at doing this, so modelling some deep breathing with them. And it's important there's probably lots of resources. I know that in the Raising Children website, which is included in the resources, they have some tip sheets on deep breathing and how to engage children in that. Another method is to encourage children to use visualization. So if your child is particularly stressed or anxious, getting children to imagine being in their favourite place. That might be at the beach, might be in the forest. It's getting children are really good at using their imagination. So getting them to imagine being in their favourite place can actually be a great way of getting children to calm down. So by taking the time to use one or more of these strategies, what you're actually doing is you're building resilience in your child and you're supporting them to develop a sense of self, all alongside nurturing their mental health and their well-being. So children learn self-control and appropriate and emotional expression by watching and experiencing how other people manage their emotions and from their own experiences of how others behave with them. So parents can help contain the child's stressful experiences by showing them how to stay calm and by getting their needs met. So it's very important that parents remember when you are stressed, when you are anxious, when you are angry yourself, to try and stay calm and model staying calm for your children. So let's look at the next slide. What we know is that a child's behaviour is actually their way of communicating a need. Children aren't trying just to be difficult. Children don't deliberately act out just to annoy parents, as much as sometimes we might think that they are. It takes time for children to learn how to manage their big emotions. Remember earlier we were talking about self-regulation, how it doesn't come naturally to young children, so they actually do need to learn it. So the meltdown that they're having, for example, in the supermarket, when they've asked for a lolly or they've asked for a toy and you said no, that meltdown that they're having is real. But underlying that meltdown is probably a strong sense of frustration or anger or disappointment. And it's that underlying feeling which actually triggers the meltdown. So what we need to do is to actually acknowledge the disappointment or frustration that the children have in that moment. Acknowledge what it is that they're experiencing. So put a name to the feelings. So you might think, for example, that the child's disappointed. And you can label the feeling of disappointment. Or you might think that the child is feeling frustrated. So you might use that word and acknowledge that the child is feeling frustrated. And so by naming the child's feelings at that very time, what you're doing is actually helping them to make sense of it all. And eventually, doing this long enough, children will then actually learn not to have meltdowns. So time out, which is a common method of punishment, to work out their feelings isn't really going to help the child. So punishing your child for having a feeling, for example, having a feeling of anger, is not the ideal way. It basically should be discouraged. When a child has a feeling of anger, then being with them in that moment to help the child manage it is what we should be doing. Because if they could work out what was wrong in the first place, and if they work out how to manage that feeling of anger, for example, then they wouldn't have had the meltdown in the first place. So we actually need to give them the words and the encouragement and support that they need to explore their feelings and their subsequent behaviour. So this is where we actually look at something we call time in. We're going to talk about time in. Time in is a concept which many of you may not have actually heard of before, but we've already been talking about it. Essentially, children learn best when they feel calm and securely connected with their parents or caregiver. So time in is about parents being with their children in times of emotional need to help them organise their feelings. It's about parents taking charge in a kind way. So acknowledging the feelings and being with them helps them to calm down. Now, we still draw boundaries around any unacceptable behaviour. So, for example, it's okay to be angry, but you can't hit. That's an important message to give to children when they are being aggressive, for example. So the use of time in with your child allows you to connect with your child and to meet their needs. Now, time in might sound like a reasonably straightforward concept, but there is a lot to it. And what we know is that parents need to be calm themselves in order to use time in. We know it's very difficult, for example, when you're angry yourself, how hard it is to actually listen to your child and reflect their feelings. So it's really actually hard to do that. So we encourage you to take some time out yourself just to calm yourself down in order for you to be with your child in those moments when they're having a big feeling. Because it's when you're calm enough, you are ready to then start using time in with your child. So look, we'll now go on to look at children's sensory processing. Sensory processing is what happens when the sensory information from our bodies travels up to our brain. And in the brain, this information is used to help us understand what's going on in the world around us and to behave and respond in different ways. Now, we all process sensory information differently, and all children have different sensory patterns. So we'll take a short time now to look at a clip on children's sensory processing.
Everyone has 7 sensory systems. They are sound, taste, smell, vision, touch, proprioceptive, and vestibular. Under-responsive versus over-responsive. You can think of each your sensory systems as being a cup, and water is that type of a sensory input. If you are under-responsive to a certain sensory input, it is like you're a big, huge cup. You keep getting water to the big cup. You can just keep adding, but it never feels full. But if you are over-responsive, it is like you are a tiny cup. All you need is just a little sensory input and you overflow. You want your cup to be full and not spill over. Each of your sensory systems is their own cup and they are different sizes. Just because you have one big cup does not mean you are under-responsive with all your senses. I have a big cup for my proprioceptive and vestibular senses and a little cup for my touch, sound, taste, and smell senses. Everyone is different and unique.
Okay, so having seen that clip, you'll see that we describe sensory patterns by using the little cup and the big cup analogy. So having a little cup means that you're more sensitive, so that a little bit feels like a lot. So someone who has a little cup might avoid overfilling their cup. They stay away from things, or they avoid things that they don't like. So someone who has a little cup might not know how to avoid overfilling their cup. So they might seem more sensitive and might seem more easily upset. Now, when someone has a big cup for sensory information, this means that they're less sensitive. To them, a lot feels only like a little. So someone who has a big cup might do things to fill up the cup. They might be busy and on the go. So a child, for example, is really on the go and really active in the classroom, and might actually seem quite distractive or disruptive, there might be an underlying sensory issue in that they feel that urge or need to run around. Now, someone who has a big cup might otherwise do nothing to fill their cup, and they might actually seem distracted or dreamy. Now, let's go on to look at different sensory patterns that children might have. Now, the pictures on the screen show different ways that we can experience touch. Now, just take a moment to think about the types of things you like and don't like about touch. Now that you've thought about your own sensory patterns, think about your child. What sort of things does your child like and why? And what sort of things don't they like and why when it comes to touch? Because we know that lots of children show sensitivity to touch or tactile sensitivity in various ways. We know that some children are very sensitive to the types of clothes that they wear. We know that some children like to be hugged a lot and other children don't like to be hugged. So it's important to just to think about your own sensory patterns and whether they're the same or different to your child. Now, this slide looks at the sensory patterns for hearing. Again, just take a moment to think about the types of things you like and don't, and what sort of things that you find particularly sensitive when it comes to hearing. I know lots of us are sensitive to various noises. For example, some of us have great sensitivity to loud sounds. Some of us have sensitivity to the ambient noise at the shopping centres. Now that you've thought about your own sensory patterns, think about your child. What does your child like and why? And what is it that they don't like and why? And think, are your child's sensory patterns the same or different to your own? Now, the next slide shows different ways that we can experience movement. Again, just have a think about the types of things you like and don't like when it comes to movement. And now that you've thought about your own sensory patterns, think about your own child. What is it about movement that your child likes or doesn't like? And are your child's own sensory patterns the same or different to yours? We know that some children like to move around a lot, with some children are more able to sit still for a long time. So it's important to understand that, for example, if your child has a strong urge to move, then it's important to keep that into consideration if we're expecting them to then sit still for a long time, because what we're asking them to do, for example, might be quite unrealistic. On this screen, it shows different ways that we can experience taste and smell. Again, which type of things do you like and why? Just take a moment to consider that. Again, now that you've thought about your own sensory issues, just take a moment to think about your child's sensory issues regarding their taste and smell. Again, are your child's sensory patterns different to yours or the same as yours? So an important function of our sensory system is to detect information that might help to keep us safe and protect us from danger. And children who are more sensitive tend to notice more sensory information within their environment. This might result in unsafe and worrying feelings for the child. So the child might respond by staying away or avoiding situations. Or they might respond by getting upset or overly emotional. And in these moments, children need help from us to work out if the sensory input is dangerous or not, and to acknowledge their feelings and experience. Children, and one example that I can think of where children are particularly sensitive is, for example, going to the swimming pool. Sometimes children get overwhelmed by both the ambient noise in the swimming pool complex. Sometimes children don't particularly like the sensation of water. So children might have one or both of those strong sensitivities. So for them, they're particularly attuned to that. And although it's not a worrying situation to us, for the child it is. And that's when as parents or caregivers, we need to be attuned to those feelings that the children might have. And as we talked about earlier, you can simply acknowledge that children are feeling anxious or stressed about coming to the swimming pool. And then we can, by having this empathic response, we can then go on to help the child cope with being at the swimming pool complex. Another example is that children are often sensitive to touch, and lots of children have sensitivity to, for example, tags on clothes or to wearing hard clothes like denim. So to children, these feelings are quite real, and although there's no danger involved, to them these feelings are quite strong. So in order to problem solve that, we might consider the situation, and we might, for example, cut the tags off their clothes, or we might allow the children in some context to wear soft clothes. We might get the children to wear or even to choose their clothes when shopping. Look, children's sensory patterns can change also during the course of the day, and what we do know is that when children are more tired, any sensitivities that they have are likely to be exacerbated. So that's very important to keep in mind. And also, as children get older, they learn to control their feelings and behaviour through their thoughts and actions. And so they get to use the thinking part of their brain, if you like. So, for example, if the music's too loud and they start to get overwhelmed, that's okay. They can just ask someone to turn it down. But when your child is younger, they can't actually, well, they might struggle to do these things for themselves. They actually need you to problem solve for them. When we detect and process sensory information, this is almost always coupled with an emotional experience. So, for example, when I hear a loud noise that I'm not in control of, like a lawnmower or a motorbike going past, I feel frightened and I want it to stop. So it's important to note that a child's sensory preferences will influence their emotional experiences. So if a child is particularly sensitive to this noise, they are going to be overwhelmed. And that's a moment where they actually do need parents to be in tune with them, to be with them to help manage that strong feeling. And it's important to remember as parents or caregivers that children are sensitive. They're not actually doing this on purpose. So we'll go on now to look at another brief clip from the Circle of Security. And this clip is a nice summary of the Circle of Security and what we've been talking about today.
As parents, we've all asked these kinds of questions. How can I stop my child behaving like this? What do I do to manage her behavior? Is there something wrong with him? Why would she behave like this just to get attention? But what if the problem lies in the question? If instead we ask, how can I improve my relationship with my child? And what is her behavior telling me? We start to see that the need for attention is actually a need for connection. A child's behavior is in fact a form of communication, and it is driven by this need for an emotional connection. Children need emotional connection with their parent as a secure base to go and explore the world, and they need it to be a safe haven to come back to when things get too difficult. It's possible to control your child's behavior by threats, rules, and rewards, but stickers, treats, and time out lose their effectiveness eventually. The thing that really changes them is your presence and unconditional love. The bottom line is, they are more likely to behave well when they're feeling secure in their emotional connectedness and safe in our love. Love isn't just a warm, fluffy feeling, and it certainly doesn't mean giving in to them. Far from it. Your children need you to be bigger, stronger, wiser, and kind, so you can both set limits and take the time to understand your child's emotional world and respond to it, helping them make sense of their mess and confusion. We know this isn't straightforward. That's why with Circle of Security Parenting, we try to support parents in this way of relating to their children, from newborns to teenagers and beyond. In fact, we're seeing remarkable effects when this way of thinking is applied to other important relationships as well. Whatever the question, learning to be connected is a big part of the answer.
Where else can you get help and information? First of all, you can talk to your child's teacher. Teachers are a very useful source of information about your child, about how your child copes at school, even about your child's sensory processing. Local governments and councils are also a good source of information. Local libraries, for example, are a great resource and have lots of books and information on children's emotional development. This is one book called When I'm Feeling Angry, which is one in a series of books that most local libraries will have. So within that series, there's books on when I'm feeling angry, when I'm feeling scared, when I'm feeling loved, and they're good picture books for young children, for parents to read with their child. And there's also books for older children as well for them to read. Other community resources that might be useful include Playgroups WA, in order to find any playgroups in your local area for children. Some families also choose to pay for private therapy, so while you're waiting for child development services, if you wish to seek out therapy in the private sector, then that's something which you're certainly entitled to do. What we encourage you to do is to actually take some time now to finalise your action plan. So at the start, you might have considered some goals that you already had. Now, having gone through and listened to this session, try and think about some of the ways that you can, some of the ideas and some of the ways, some of the things that you can do in order to achieve your goals. And we encourage you to put this in writing. It might also be helpful to talk to your child's teacher or daycare about the things you're trying to do, about the ideas that you already have, because they might already, or first of all, they might be able to help you to try to achieve some of those things as well, or in fact, they might also have in place some of those ideas and actions. Also, we'd like you to hold on to that action plan so that you can talk about it with your clinician at your next appointment. Many thanks for tuning in today and taking the time to listen to this presentation. Best of wishes for the future.